Good evening. I'm glad that you're here tonight, all of you, each of you, for our Wednesday night Bible study. My name is Patrick Hayes, and this is Redeeming Life Ministries Church in Stanton, Virginia. We've been doing a series on the 12 wisdoms of Solomon, and we did the 12th one last Wednesday night. Last time I was here on a Wednesday night. And this is from my own writing. I wrote a book about King Solomon. And Solomon asked his old general Benaiah. Benaiah was a general of the army under Abner and then under Joab during the days of David's kingdom. And then he became the high general for Solomon's armies. He's also famous because he headed up the two foreign mercenary groups known as the Cherethites and the Pelethites. Bible scholars argue over where those men came from, but they weren't Israelites, and they could be trusted because they had no political interests. And Benaiah headed them up. What we read here about Benaiah, the son of Jehoiada, the son of a valiant man of Kabzeel, who had done many acts. He slew 2 lion-like men of Moab. He went down also and slew a lion in the midst of a pit in the time of snow. We might also look at verse 22. I think a little more is added there. Okay, it just repeats his name. These things did Benaiah the son of Jehoiada, and had the name among 3 of David's mighty men. So he's the last of the great 37 mighty men still living. And I read a little bit at the close last time I spoke of Solomon introducing this man to come up. He advances along the wall, past the rows of men who sit at his left. He makes his way toward the front. He halts, standing before Solomon. My king. Oh, General Benaiah, you knew my father David well, better than any man yet living, better than I knew my own father, for you were with him in all of his conflicts while I was a boy left here in Jerusalem to school. Yes, perhaps 'tis so. Tell us then, by his own admission, my father was a man of war and shed blood. But do you say that King David was indeed in his heart a man of war? The old warrior's mouth opens slightly. He eyes the king with a deep squint. His nod is short and sharp. He turns the squint toward the seated group of foreign dignitaries at Solomon's table. He makes the same quick nod to them. Ah, not he, my king. David was a conflicted man, a man forced to war, but a lover of peace. He craved peace above all things. Indeed, a gift for warfare, but a heart for peace. For this, he hoped in you for his successor. For this, he gave you the name Solomon, the man of peace, as he had afore named your brother Absalom, his father's peace, hoping ever for an end of struggles. But there were gathered about him men of other moods, angry, bloody men, possessed of an evil mezimah, a takbulah for murder and vengeance. They kept him at it. They drove for combat always. When David would sue for peace, they'd manipulate for war, and their repute became his. But I know how he hated it. I know well the song of his soul. He prayed against them. I've learned it. Perhaps you've learned it. I believe this will be Psalm 55, and you might have a little trouble going through it because I've got it paraphrased in Benaiah's mouth, but maybe you can scroll through it as we go, Jeremy. Psalm 55. This is David's prayer against persons who incite war. Give ear to my prayer, O God. I mourn in my complaint. My heart is sore pained within me. Horrors have overwhelmed me. Oh, that I had the wings of a dove to fly away and be at rest. Lo, then I'd wander far off and remain in the wilderness. I'd hasten my escape from the windy storm and tempest. He pauses and says, yea, David longed for the dove of peace, while others kept strife and violence, mischief and sorrow, wickedness, deceit and guile. In the very city he had established and named Jerusalem, the peaceful place. He quotes on, destroy, O Lord, and divide their tongues, for I've seen their violence and strife in the city. Day and night they go about upon the walls. Mischief and sorrow are in the midst of it. Wickedness is amidst it. Deceit and guile depart not her streets. He nods again. And who was the man who had vexed David so? Not an enemy, David says, but one with him, an acquaintance, an equal, a counselor to him. Who was the bloody, deceitful man against whom David prayed such a curse? Who? 'Twas no enemy who reproached me, he sang. Then I could have borne it. Neither 'twas he who hated me, who magnified himself against me. Then I'd have hid myself from him. But 'twas he, a man my equal, my guide, my acquaintance. We took sweet counsel together. We walked in company to the house of God. Let death seize upon him. Let him go down quick to the grave. For wickedness is in his dwelling and among his company. As for me, I shall call upon God, and the Lord will save me. God has delivered my soul in peace from the battle that was against me. For there were many with me. God will hear and afflict him, because he'll not change. 'Tis why he fears not God. He's put his hands against such as be at peace with him. He's broken his covenant. The words of his mouth are smoother than butter, but war is in his heart. His words are softer than oil, yet they are drawn swords. But you, O God, will bring him down to the pit of destruction. The bloody and deceitful man will not live out half his days. Some think that David spake this song against King Saul. Others think it was against Absalom, his own son, or against Ahithophel, the turncoat. But no, I can tell you all of whom he truly spake. 'Twas the blaster, the instigator. 'Twas he, Joab. He made himself, through advantage of kinship and recklessness of valor, to be David's general. He was the son to David's sister. He was his most fearless fighter, filled with foolhardy stubbornness and a thirst for vengeance. Oh yes, a hater of peace, and so were his brothers Abishai and Asahel. Yea, my lords, it were they, not David, who stoked and stirred the cauldron of war always, till it boiled over again and again. 'Twas Joab who went in hatred to murder the captain Abner, who had come to beg peace in the land, who had come to put an end to the long strife between Saul's and David's houses, who had come to promise, Abner did, to go to the tribal heads and urge them to make David king and have one nation again. Joab murdered Abner with the deceitful dagger, while his mouth spoke guileful, smooth words of friendship. And why did he do it? Abner, 6 years earlier, had slain Joab's brother Asahel, who had charged him at him in the battle that he and Joab and Abishai had begun. Though Abner warned Asahel, begged him not to come at him, yet the young fool ran in to have Abner's blood. And Abner had no choice but to defend himself with the lance. 'Twas no other stopping the wild running buck with the sharpened sword swinging high and screaming madly for blood and for battle, and fell there, though Abner knew it would bring on the hard war between the two houses. Oh yes, Abner, the old warrior, by then had grown sick of war, as I have. The longing for peace had already begun to call in his bones. Even then, his soul, Abner's, was scorched with the fires of too many battles. He too thirsted for the cool springs of peace, but Joab and his brothers would not let him drink of them, and Joab killed Abner for it. And when David had laid Abner's body to burial and called the tribes to mourn him, he cast the curse upon the murderer. Would you like to see this verse? David's curse of Abner. Curse upon Joab. 2 Samuel 3:29. I'll have Benaiah paraphrasing it. 2 Samuel 3:29. Let the blood of Abner fall upon the head of Joab and upon all his father's house. Let there not fail of the house of Joab one with a fester or a leprosy, or who cripples upon a staff, or who falls upon the sword, or who begs a bread crust. Yet to keep peace among his family and in Judah, David put not Joab down. And it was Joab who brought again the criminal prince Absalom, hoping to find opportunity in him, and saw too late the danger of the prince, and knew when Absalom's rebellion tore the land, how it'd be recalled that it was he, Joab, who had brought him. And Joab feared it, and so murdered Absalom as he hung helpless in the tree, slew him so it'd be not known, though David had charged them all to spare the usurping renegade son Absalom. And Joab shed the blood of war in peacetime, murdering also the captain Amasa, until at the last your father charged you, King Solomon, that your kingdom could have no peace, while Joab the murderer and his ilk remained. And 'twas I whom you sent, King Solomon, at last to rid us of his gory ways. Know, my king and my lords, know ye that King David was no true warrior. In his deeds, yes, but not in his heart. Not like them. They loved it, joyed in it, sought it out, provoked it. He was different. He fought harder than they, but only to get finished with it. They would have fought everyone, would have filled the land with blood deeper than a horse could wade through. King David used to moan about those nephews of his. What have I to do with ye sons of Zeruiah? I heard him say it often in anguish at their impetuous ways. And I heard him pray, oh God, scatter those who delight in war. Yet there were times when David too was caught up in the madness. At Rabbah, that's the capital of Ammon, fighting the Ammonites. At Rabbah, the siege he called all for insult, their king having humiliated his peaceful emissaries. And it was during the long siege that David's greatest sorrow began, for he left the fight in Joab's hands. I hope this is reading well. It's a man talking, answering Solomon's question. Was David really, in his heart, a lover of warfare? And I've got Benaiah proving against it. Now, what I've just referred to, David could not take an insult very well. Some say it was because he's redheaded, and that's a red-haired trait. Jumping to anger. I doubt that that's true. I know a lot of hotheads who jump to anger of all colors and all types. David, when he marched to Jerusalem, which at that time was called the city of Jebus, when he finally had all 12 armies of the 12 tribes and was able to take the top of Mount Zion to build his capital there, the Jebusites behind their fortress walls up there, said, "We're not scared of you, shepherd boy. Even our blind and lame could defeat you." And they put their blind and lame up on the wall, and that angered David. And he turned to his men and said something foolish. He said, "Whoever gathers a few men and crawls up through that gutter pipe into the city and gets the gates open for us, that man will be the supreme general of my armies." Well, guess who did it? Joab. And David was held to it, to make Joab general, and he never could get rid of him after that. At Rabbah, the king of the Ammonites died, and David, in a good gesture, sent a number of his lords to represent Israel down there at the funeral. And the new king of Ammon, the dead man's son, took them, cut the backs off of their skirts so that their naked hind end showed, and shaved off half their beards and sent them home. David took that as such an insult that he starts this war that I've got Benaiah talking about right now. And it was such a bloody battle. The utter destruction of the city of Rabbah. I'll get back into his mouth. Is this interesting to anybody? And he left the fight in Joab's hands at Rabbah. And there was the great blunder, I think. David returned to Jerusalem and begat a child of, begging your pardon, my king, for telling this, but you ask my opinion of your father's heart, and this is the true telling of it. Benaiah turns to bow slightly to Solomon. Solomon nods and extends his hand, palm upward. No, it's all open record. Say on, sir. Yes, king. Well, David begat a child of the Hittite soldier's wife, your mother, O king. To marry her rightfully, it becoming clear the husband must be eliminated, David ordered us to abandon Uriah, her husband, to the hail of arrows shot from the wall at Rabbah. We did it, sirs. Joab ordered us at it, said that Uriah was only a foreign mercenary and expendable. He did not tell us why we were to do this foulness. And David the king came later to the very place where Uriah and his men had fallen, stood there upon the spot to receive the surrender of the Rabbah Ammonites. He was in a kind of stupor, a violent madness, and we learned only very later the cause of his madness. He had begun the time of his great sorrow. The child had died, but it hadn't been enough punishment. The punishment for killing the man to have his wife. He had Prophet Nathan's cursed sentence ringing in his ears. I know it now. I watched him over the later years. That sentence, the indictment, it drove at David to strange extremes, as though everything that happened to him was interpreted through it. He was broken by it, twisted, contorted from the man he had been and would never be again. Yea, 'twas a different man who stood there at Rabbah, his eyes blinking hard, his mind reeling with the words that had cursed him. We would hear about it later, hear him say it often, musing over it as though it alone brought every calamity upon him. He mulled over the curse from Nathan's mouth. The trouble and the sword will never depart you and your house, O David. And in the child's death, and the child's death had only begun the trouble. David knew there was more to come, knew it'd never be enough to expunge the guilt, that it would take blood to wipe out the stain, and indeed the blood of thousands would befoul the earth before it was over. That blood, Uriah's blood, called for blood, as Abel's blood had called. I think David heard it calling him. He stood there on the spot where he knew Uriah's blood had pooled and soaked the earth, felt it boiling under his feet, calling its outrage and curse against him. Stood there and watched those miserable, besieged, starving Ammonite skeletons staggering out of the gates, bone thin and surrendering at last, just carcasses with barely living skin stretched over them, begging, cowering, and groveling for mercy and for water and bread. I watched his eyes, the hatred in them, the revulsion against the wretches, the impulse to transfer his guilt to them. For it was their arrows had done the deed, you see. Their arrows killed Uriah. Not his order, really, not his maneuverings, but their arrows, Ammonite arrows, had actually killed the Hittite husband there. And the trembling king of the place, Hanun ben Nahash, came out and bowed to David. David took from his head the circlet of bejeweled gold and fixed it upon his own brow. And he turned to us with the sudden scream, himself trembling, shuddering with the bloodlust and with the horror of his own words. He nodded to Joab to repeat the order. "Take the officers," Joab yelled. "Take them to their own ovens." Those were the brick kilns where they had burned their own sons to Molech. "Take them and burn them. Give them what they gave. Burn them all." And we did it, sirs. All ye know what we did. We did it at Joab's command. Did it caught up in David's fury. But the oven doors being too small for the corpses of grown men, we had to dismember them. We used saws, axes, and harrows to do it. We stacked their heads and limbs and torsos like cordwood for the burning. They had each been killed, killed affront him, beheaded one by one on the spot, the same spot where Uriah had fallen, until their blood washed out a little gully in the dirt. David stood there and watched the ground, watched the Ammonite blood pool and spill, wanting it to wash out the whole place where, we thought of it only later, when we heard where Uriah the Hittite died by their arrows. I'm going to pause right here to make an argument. Remember, this is a character saying all these words. Now it's going to be Brother Pat saying it. Let me see. I've got to find my right. Well, if I can find my footnote number. Okay. 2 Samuel 12:31. And David brought forth the people that were therein, these are Ammonites, and put them under saws and under harrows of iron and under axes of iron, and made them pass through the brick kiln. And thus did he unto all the cities of the children of Ammon. So David and all the people returned to Jerusalem. Let me read my footnote to you. If this would be interesting to you, there's an argument to be made about it. If I can get my cursor to work. Scholars dispute whether King David orders the Ammonite people to work with these implements, axes and saws and harrows, to rebuild their burned cities, or whether he has them tortured with these implements as punishment for their wicked ways, or whether he dismembers their bodies with saws, harrows, and axes and burns them in the ovens. Each of these interpretations are horrible to contemplate, and the third is the worst. However, it must be noted that David is capable of mass killings of soldiers surrendered to his armies. He does so with 2/3 of all Moabite prisoners of war. 2 Samuel 8:2, if you want to jot that down. You don't have to turn to it. He then declares, "Moab is my washpot." That means either a foot bath, but more likely it means a latrine. And David says that in Psalm 60, verse 8, and in Psalm 108, verse 9. Moab is my toilet, my washpot. Numbers of David's dead enemies are recorded with some elation. 22,000 Syrians killed, and 18,000 again. Too many verses to read. Just go read the histories of David's wars. You'll find those big numbers. Also note how David annihilates Jeshurite, Jezrite, and Amalekite civilians after battles. As for David's actions at the surrender of Rabbah in Ammon, go to the Chronicles version of what we're just looking at. This will be 1 Chronicles 20, verse 3. And he brought out the people that were in it and cut them with saws, with harrows of iron, and with axes. Even so dealt David with all the cities of the children of Ammon. Well, that's the Chronicles version. He cut them. From this version, I can imagine Benaiah's report to Solomon's assemblage. I tried to soften it somewhat by having Benaiah say that this horror was imposed only upon Ammonite officers and not upon all of their soldiers, nor upon the common citizenry of Ammon. Yet such may have been the case, given David's earlier severities upon certain other enemy peoples. Well, I'm not getting any nods or smiles or amens. That makes David sound a whole lot like a Nazi chief, doesn't it? And yet, as we read the battles of the Old Testament, the slaughter just seems immense. And piles of bodies unburied and uncared for. I'm back to Benaiah now, telling about it all. When 'twas over, he rode to Jerusalem wearing the gaudy Ammonitish crown. And before him went the rider bearing the pole topped with the trophy, the grisly head of King Hanun, who had insulted him. David brought it all before him all the way, watching it bob there above him. And when we entered the city amid the shouting and celebrating, he rode it straight to the tomb where the Hittite Uriah lay and cast it there. He did it before all else was done. Cast the head upon poor Uriah's grave and sat in his weary saddle a long while, looking where it had rolled, silent and unresponding to the shouts and the hurrahs of the crowds who had followed him. Then David turned and rode through them to his house and went in without a word to the people. But some of them knew by now, and we returning soldiers began to learn it, why he did it, though he never said more about it. This is why King David gained the reputation for a hard warrior. Some still say his cruel action upon the Ammonites was the will of Jehovah, that God told him to do it, to rid the earth of a race that never should have been born, the children of Ammon, the son of Lot, and his own daughter, conceived in the cave of drunken incest. But it cannot be, can it? For Moab was also conceived and born thus, there and then, the two sons of Lot by his two daughters, Moab and Ammon. And Moab produced the lady Ruth, the wife of Boaz, who was ancestress to David's own father. And some say it was but God's retribution upon Ammonite cruelties. For Nahash, their king, would have put out all the right eyes of the Benjamite men of Jabesh Gilead, but for King Saul's attack upon them. Yet David later befriended Nahash, the old king, and sought out an alliance with him. Some others insist that David had punished the Ammonites for their vile religion in passing their sons to Moloch by burning. But even this doesn't account for all that my eyes saw on that day. I conclude, 'twas a hard desperation, the craving to reduce to ashes and burned blood the place where it had started, the trouble to rid the earth of the memory of the insult that drove David to the war, during which time he stole the wife, and at which time he sent her rightful husband to his death, to erase all of it and to wash it clean, but knowing all the while that no number of beheadings and burnings would ever be enough to expunge it, would never cauterize it from him. He knew this fully when he arrived home to the woman who would soon bear him a second son. You, O King Solomon, the son he gave completely to God and to the oversight of priests and prophets. Oh, he sent the garish crown back to the Ammonites, to King Hanun's brother Shobai. He bolstered him up as the new king of Ammon and sent him back the spoil to help him rebuild the broken city of Rabbah. And David came there to him, to Shobai, in refuge years later when he fled from the bloodiness he knew was the true price he was to repay for Uriah's blood, the sword in his own house, the rebellion of your brother Absalom. Oh, I know these things, my king, and I fear not to say them to all of ye. 'Tis true King David did these cruelties, but 'tis not yet right that he should have merited repute as the bloody man, the lover of warfare. He did it not in zeal, but in horror. I know. But he was yet not like them, not like Joab and Abishai and the others. For I also beheld them in the doing of it. They didn't tremble, not for rage, not for fear, nor for horror. They did it in delight. Your father, O King Solomon, was, as I insist this day, and before ye all, and despite his deeds at the time, a man of peace in his heart, in his soul, always the serene shepherd boy, driven by the circumstances of his times and by the hardness of those about him, and by his own unrelenting guilt at being the warrior he despised to be, longing always only for those cool green pastures of his youth, only for the sweet waters of the well of his childhood at Bethlehem, always reaching to get himself back to the innocence. Benaiah stops abruptly. He has said too much, and he senses much of it contradictory and confusing to his audience. His mouth closes. His old head shakes slowly. Still, he looks up to say a bit more. Forgive me if I've overspoken. I've much relished today the story of our good sea captain. Much of what he has said has charmed me. Much else has rebuked me. For, like my great King David, I too am an old warrior with bloody hands, and I'm weary of soldiery. You speak here of the takbulah of warfare. I know much of it, more than any of ye do. If the necessity for combat arises again in my time, I shall again offer my counsel, my takbulah for strategy in battle. I know how to do it. I learned it from ready men and from years of service in bloodshed. Yet I pray there'll never be again such a necessity. I thank God now that we've here this man of peace for our king in Israel. O King Solomon, I say to all ye who may delight in the war, listen to this man, our king. He offers a better takbulah than mine. And what do you want to hear? The screams of children, the shriekings of women, the groans of dying men? Have we not heard it enough? We rather could hear the words of this man of peace and of others like him, calling us to our senses. I, Benaiah, was young when I was conscripted to battle, and battle was all I learned in life, all I knew. They did this to me, made me thus. Do we want to keep doing this to our young men? To send them out to pay with their blood and innocence older men's debts of greed and hatred? Do we? Yea or nay? Remember, he's talking to a collection of nations. I can't say what we all want. I don't know. I'm afraid. I shall die afraid. Oh, I was known to be fearless. I who am sung for bravery, for fighting lion-like men, and for killing very lions themselves. I'm afraid. I fear not warriors, not battle itself, not for my own life. Never. I fear ye, my lords. I fear the decisions you will make for my children and for my children's children and their children. I fear we shall, even after this wise man has finished his course, that we'll have never learned from him. When he says to us, the fear of Jehovah is the beginning of knowledge, but fools despise wisdom and instruction. He brings us God's solution to our dilemma. Fear ye God, seek ye Him, Solomon says. Know ye Him, learn ye His ways, gain ye His wisdom, yield to His corrections. Get ye this first. King Solomon tells us, get this first. Get understanding before getting all else. I wish someone had told me so when I was young, that I might have been wise enough to hear it. But I was young, a fool, as we all are born fools. And so, had they told me, I wouldn't have heard it. I would have despised such words, as I despised all wisdom and all correction, except what was shouted to me by military men. But I'm older now, old. I do not despise it now, but it's too late for me. As he has said this day, 'tis the curse of man. We do not learn anything till it's too late to do good with it. And the young, all they are fools, as we've been fools, and don't listen and can't hear. For this, I'm afraid, we do not fear God at the beginning of our knowledge. General Benaiah stops. He shakes his head with a grim scowl. He bows his head to the king, turns and bows to all. He walks erect back the way into the shadow under the pillar. No one makes a sound as he moves past them. Solomon waits until the general has seated. He rises and also bows to the room. He thanks them for coming and for listening. He walks out of the hall through the inner door. The signal is given for servants to bring in food for the guests. Neither the commander Shammah, nor the general Benaiah, nor the high priest Zadok, nor the queen of Sheba remains for the meal. The red sun slants its dying light through the west window of the great hall. Servants light the lamps. The dinner continues for 2 hours. The discussion is loud. It's the last chapter of the book. Well, all of that arose because Solomon's teaching about Takbulah and one of his men, last time I spoke on this, had raised a question. The word Takbulah is also used twice in the scriptures, in David's Psalms, about warfare. So isn't there a Takbulah of war? And Solomon says, yes, but I've only written 2 proverbs that even mention war or battle. It's not my issue, but if you want to hear about warfare, we've got the greatest military man on earth right now, sitting in a shadow back there. Let's bring him up. And he calls old Benaiah up and has him give the speech I've read to you tonight. So that's it. We'll get on to something else next Wednesday night. Begin a new set of topics. Does anybody have any comments on what I read tonight? Or are you just glad it's over? Yes, Laura.
Because I made notes and I missed one of them. I've got 11 of the 12. So could you
All right, the Hebrew words.
review the 12?
All right. Chokmah is wisdom. Then Musar, that's correction. Then Binah is understanding. Then Sakal, S-A-K-A-L, is prudence and normal behavior. Then Tzedek, which is righteousness. And Mishpat, which is discernment. I might not be getting them in order now. Then there's Mezimah, which is skillful planning for a large future, for the further generations to benefit from. Then there is Mesharim, which is fairness or equity. How many is that, Laura? Oh, Hokmah, Musar, Beina, Sakal, Tzedek, Mishpat. Mesharim, Beina.
You said being
Yeah, that's the third one.
So I have Orma,
Orma, of course. Orma, my favorite. That's subtlety.
and
Mezima, yeah. That's planning for the future. Dath, Dath, which is knowledge. Lekah, which is love of learning. And finally, Takbula. Yeah, thank you. Thank you for being interested in those things. Anything else? Anything else? Do I sound like a peacenik? You don't know what a peacenik is? You know the difference between a dove and a hawk? Political terms. Someone who is hawkish pushes for war. Someone who is dovish says, let's not go into this war. Let's hold back and see if we can work it out diplomatically. Sometimes the warnicks, that's 1950s beatnik talk, putting Nick on the end of it, imitating Russian speech. The warnicks, sometimes they're right, and has to be, and sometimes they're very wrong. And sometimes the peaceniks are very wrong, but sometimes they're quite right. But that tension has to go on in any society. And I'm presenting an old warrior who says, we did it too much, we were wrong sometimes. And it's troubled me, and it's troubled Israel, and it's troubled the world. But mostly, in answer to your question, King Solomon, it really troubled David as an individual. And that's the whole point. I'm not trying to preach an opinion to anybody. I'm just trying to paint a picture of what might have been talked about on a day like that. And not that anybody ultimately listened to him. They're just hollering past the mustard around the table. So that's it. I'm going to let you out early tonight because I ain't got nothing more.
So that conversation
Uh-huh.
and Benaiah speaking to a group would have been one of the big meetings that Solomon would have had
Yeah.
with world leaders sitting around.
As I see it,
Yeah.
this is the final speaker of a week of diplomatic talks at Solomon's table. Yeah. Benaiah gets to close it all. The last word is, do we want our children to live in the horror of warfare? Can we listen to this man and all of us, different nations, put together some kind of accords that might last in some way? You know, of course, those things only last for a time in history, and then something else breaks out. But
it seems to be dismal.
yeah,
End in gloom if you don't see the transference of Takbullah to the next. Solomon's got no one to hand it to, so the meeting is almost in vain.
mm-hmm.
No one's getting it. The old sailor and the young boy with the lamp. There's more hope in the end of that